Hello everybody, it is Tom, and welcome to another video. So, we are at episode 7 of season 2 of Heartstopper, somehow. I'm not sure how that happened, but here we are. Last time in episode 6, we had a lot happened. We had Nick and Charlie meeting up with Nick's dad for a very brief period of time. We had Darcy throwing a birthday party for Tara with special guest Vodka, and that did not end well for Mr. Ajayi's bed, but it all worked out in the end. We had Nick coming out to everyone at the party during the game of Truth or Dare. We had Mr. Ajayi and Mr. Farouk finally moving forward in their relationship. We had James kissing Isaac, and that not going very well. Darcy finally admitting that she loves Tara, though in a drunken in a state of drunkenness, but nonetheless we know that she meant it. So alright, so we're moving on to episode 7, which I think is one of my favorites of the season. I still don't know which episode is my favorite, because they are all just so good, so I will have to ruminate on that some more, but episode 7 has some immensely good scenes in it. So without any further ado, I said that weird. So let's get on to watching it then. Hooray! I don't know. I'm tangled. Alright, so let's get right to the episode. Let's do it.
I was crying at a party.
So another really good Baby Queen song here. I really like this one.
Which is
Girls, are you awake?
Love the battle roll that Darcy does out of the bed. So Nick's duffel bag there from France. Something with the Eiffel Tower on it. Looks like a book of some kind. I love this zoom in on Nick. It's a very, very effective shot. And he's scrolling through. There's 7,000 photos of Charlie Spring. I feel like Nick doesn't need to come out. He just needs to release the contents of his photo roll to everyone, and they'll be like, ah, yes. So then Nick, looking at the picture of them at the restaurant, noticing that Charlie has not eaten a single bite, and the happy little smile turns to concern. Same zoom in on Charlie. Charlie also looking at pictures of him and Nick. Freaking Ben. Honestly, I'm not sure why Charlie has not blocked Ben at this point, because I feel like blocking Ben would probably be a good idea, but maybe it's that self-destructive curiosity, I don't know. So I like the parallels between the Nick and Charlie moments there, where we have the same zoom in past their Paris bags and to them both lying in bed looking at pictures from the Paris trip, and then both of them had something that turns their mood. And in Nick's case, he goes from happy looking at his boyfriend to worrying about his boyfriend when he sees the picture of Charlie's uneaten dinner, whereas Charlie makes that emotional switch because he hears from Ben.
She said, well, nothing makes sense. I said, hey.
And Elle got into Lambert. Hooray! And her application piece has been chosen to be shown at the Here in Queer exhibition that celebrates young queer and trans artists. And then we go straight to Tao, dancing far better than he does in season 1. But just channeling all the happy, finally dating Elle kind of vibes here. Oh my gosh, Tao.
Anything I should know about?
Me and Elle decided to get together.
Tao's mom, as usual, just being just a ray of sunshine here. And so happy as Elle's biggest fan.
Oh, and Elle is the most special girl. The perfect girl for my perfect boy.
I love her gushing here and just being the perfect girl for my perfect boy. And, oh, I have to tell everyone. We've all been waiting for this. I love... Rail? What? Oh, no! Oh, sweetheart. How did you kill them? Darla killed a fly just a minute. I tried to save you. Where's the dead fly body? Oh, you're alive? You're alive? You're still alive? Alright, don't. You're still alive? You're okay. But you might just be stuck. Yeah, so what that was about was flies keep getting into my house, and if I do not catch the fly and release them, Darla will eat them. So, I spent like 15 minutes trying to catch this one fly earlier, and finally had to give up and start the video. And Darla just like brought him in here in her mouth, and I thought he was dead, but he was not. He was just stunned, hopefully. So like I carried him outside, and while I was ferrying him outside, another fly got in, so then I had to chase him around. But I'm back now, so I have no idea what I was talking about. Yeah, I think I was talking about how excited Tao's mom was about him and Elle getting together. Yeah. But yeah, obviously, like, it continues to be wonderful that in this show, the fact that Elle is trans, so many shows, anytime there's a trans character, their whole character arc, their whole story is defined by trauma and bullying and tragedy and things like that. So I really love that the fact that Elle is trans is not even a consideration here. The fact that Tao's mom uses the phrase perfect girl to describe her is just like such a validating statement to use towards a trans girl. Like, just like A++, and I really like that about it. Like, I don't think that it's lessening the struggle that trans people have to go through, because like we have so many examples of stories showcasing the crap that we have to go through. So it's really nice to see a story where it's not even like, when you rank the things that are going on in Elle's life and Elle's story, like her being trans is not even in like the top 5. You know, it's just a thing that she is, and it doesn't dictate every moment of her story in her life, and I like that.
I have to call Auntie Lee and Auntie
Mum,
Sang.
we haven't talked about actually being boyfriend and girlfriend.
We've all been waiting for this.
Yeah, she's already designing the wedding invitations, Tao. The wheels are in motion. There's nothing you can do to stop them. And we're back to dancing. And a really nice title card here where we have the word sorry, and we'll talk about like the different characters who say sorry throughout the course of this episode, but obviously the main one is Ben. And I like how we have the rainbow wave rising up here and washing away the word sorry, which of course we see the rainbow wave later. Nelly!
Dad called, he's coming for dinner next week.
So I'm impressed that like Nick's dad actually followed through on coming to dinner, based on how lukewarm he was about it when Nick met up with him earlier. But we were talking last time about how it seems like Stefan likes to keep his new life and his old life separate. But I guess coming to England, there's not that danger of new life and old life intersecting, so he can safely come over to dinner.
Could we invite Charlie over?
That's a lovely idea.
What, you're joking?
Yes, we can invite his parents and his sister, make a proper dinner party out of it.
I love how Sarah just flat out ignores David when he's objecting during this part.
How come Nick gets to invite someone and I don't?
Do you have a girlfriend you'd like to invite, David?
The fact that this is phrased as a question, do you have a girlfriend you'd like to invite? But she doesn't even wait for his answer because she knows, no, he does not. And I love Nick's pleased little smile at that. Alright, spring sibling gaming session. It is sad that we don't have Ollie there as well, but, you know, it's nice to see Tori and Charlie spending some quality time together.
You should have come. It was really fun.
My summer is for sleeping, not visiting old museums.
I hear you, Tori.
We've been invited to Nick's for a dinner party.
Mum will love that. She's not exactly Nick's biggest fan, is she?
Maybe this will help her see how great he is.
It will help her see how great he is. Here's freaking Ben again. Though I'm wondering, like, if Ben says that he saw that Charlie read his message, this suggests that Charlie did at some point between when we last saw him and now open that message. Because if he had just, like, flicked it, it would not have shown as read. So I feel like maybe Ben and what Ben has to say is kind of the scab that Charlie can't stop picking at. Where, like, because he could very easily block Ben if he didn't want to hear from him, but he has not done that. I have a similar morbid curiosity when I receive hate comments. I know that I should just delete them and move on with my life, but instead much of the time I read them and seethe over them instead of just, like, again, deleting them and moving on with my life. So, yeah, I understand. Tori's pretty good at reading Charlie, so I'm sure she knows that whatever he just saw on his phone has disturbed him to a certain degree, but she doesn't ask about it. And, like, that does seem to be very true to the Spring family dynamic of, like, even when you really care about someone, not really asking those questions. Like, Nick and Charlie, if it had been Nick sitting next to Charlie in that moment, Nick would have immediately asked him, like, what's wrong? What's going on? Do you want to talk about it? But Tori notices it and then, like, you know, doesn't say anything, just continues playing games with him, because that's just how the Spring family operates and communicates. Yay! Come along! I love these moments in this episode and the next one where we see the whole friend group in different places responding to texts and posts and things like this. Sahar's bedroom is badass. Eagle-eyed viewers will spot both the rainbow flag and a bye heart on her very kick-ass guitar. So yeah, Sahar's awesome. I will not be taking questions at this time. Okay, and here we have first sign of some growth from Tao. So Tao's first instinct is to say, does this mean you're leaving us? The kind of joke, not joke, showing his insecurities about being left behind or being abandoned. And then he thinks about it. And then he deletes it, which is great to see. And he changes it to a much more neutral and encouraging, did you get a place? And Elle at first is super excited, like, I got in! But then she stops and thinks about it and changes her answer to no, not yet, kind of buying herself some more time, I guess, to figure out how to tell Tao. I do feel like she didn't think this through entirely because, of course, at the exhibition, someone's going to mention the fact that she got in. So it was always going to come unraveled at that point. I don't think she was thinking, like, far ahead. She was just thinking in terms of, like, Tao and I finally figured out that we like each other, our relationship is finally getting started, and, you know, I don't know how to tell him that I might be leaving. I understand her hesitation here. Again, I just love the group chat. I love the group chat messages. Alright, so we have Darcy heading home. It's interesting that, like, whenever we usually see Darcy, she's usually wearing, like, really bright colors and, you know, eye makeup and a scrunchie, and there's always, like, a lot of brightness going on with Darcy. But at this moment, when she's heading to the home that is so toxic for her, she's more kind of washed out. Like, there's no brightness on her whatsoever. Everything she's wearing is, like, a duller color. Kind of like she's hiding her true self as she approaches, even wearing, like, a hooded sweatshirt, which is a good tool for hiding. I do almost wonder, like, does she wear the same kinds of clothes at home as she does when she's out and about with the friend group? So we're all walking down the street, and this is a really good shot where we start with Isaac framed in the center, and then we kind of pan backwards through all the couples. Darcy, again, now is wearing really bright colors again.
Like, maybe a gray. Okay.
Are they talking about suit colors, maybe a gray or light gray? And that is what Nick ends up going with, so.
Said I'd meet up with James.
Yeah, so again, these are well-meaning people who just don't understand how insensitive they're being, but the whole teasing Isaac about James thing, and saying, like, oh, they're gonna kiss, and then we'll talk about later, but, you know, I understand why they do this, especially as they are so focused. Like, they have achieved, like, extreme happiness because of the relationship that they are in, because of their boyfriends, their girlfriends, things like that. So they want Isaac to experience that same happiness, so they're encouraging. And also they can probably see that he and James like each other quite a bit. But, of course, the important piece of the puzzle that they're missing is that Isaac already knows that he's not interested in James like that, and is possibly not interested in anyone like that, though obviously he hasn't figured that out yet. He's just thinking, what's wrong with me? So, unfortunately, what is a well-meaning expression of, like, friendly teasing is probably quite hurtful to Isaac in this moment because of all that he's dealing with. And kind of like the person at the at the Here in Queer exhibit later says, knowing something's different about you but not having the words to explain it. I think Isaac here just doesn't even know how to explain how he's feeling.
For prom. Okay.
Alright, we're at the thrift store. And here's frickin' Ben again.
I think I'm gonna go to prom.
Yeah?
Would you like to, be my prom date?
I think it's kind of cute how nervous and kind of hesitant Nick is as he quietly asks Charlie to prom.
I don't know, maybe it's stupid.
No.
It's kind of a similar vibe to when Charlie gave Nick the chocolate bar and was like, oh, I'm embarrassed, I don't want it to be a thing. And Nick here as well is like giving that same vibe of being embarrassed and afraid that Charlie's going to think that it's silly.
I don't want to wear matching suits.
Oh, me neither.
I love how serious Charlie is about not wearing matching suits.
This one's pretty.
Elle. I mean, is it possible for Elle to wear something and not look amazing in it? I don't think so.
You got in, didn't you?
Tara's squeal again.
Don't tell the others.
I love this. I love this, where Charlie is piling sunglasses on Tao while Nick takes photos. It's just beautiful. Darcy in her awesome suit, which, I mean, I feel like it would look slightly better without the Crocs, but, you know.
I don't know if I can afford it. I haven't got much left after
This kind of thing honestly makes me tear up, where, like, you have all the friend group, without question, immediately, like, handing over their cash, like, here, just to make sure that Darcy can pay for this awesome suit. Oh, poor Isaac. No book in sight. Just rubbing his hands, looking nervous. In a bookstore. So, the fact that Isaac is in a bookstore and not only does not have a book, but is not even glancing at all the books around him, like, you know things are serious. You know that boy has stuff on his mind.
Sorry, some man just bought like 15 of those Penguin Cloth Pound Classics.
That is like life goals.
The fact that when James comes over, he and Isaac immediately, easily, like, fall into laughing conversation about books and things like that just shows how well they genuinely do get along, and why it's so easy to understand how Isaac would think that if he was going to fall for anybody, it would be James.
So I'm guessing you don't feel the same about me then?
And I respect James a lot for coming right out and saying, like if it were me, I would want to just vanish into the ground and not talk about it ever again. But James comes right out and says, like, so you don't feel the same about me then?
I don't know how I'm supposed to feel when I have a crush on someone.
And I like that Isaac tries so hard to explain how he's feeling here, which is really difficult.
I read all these books where people fall in love, and I still have absolutely no idea.
Loveless in the background.
I thought that I might feel that way about you, but then we kissed, and I just knew that I didn't. I think there might be something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you.
James must be really hurting here, having Isaac, very gently and kindly tell him that I thought maybe I felt that way about you, but then I just knew that I didn't. And the fact that James immediately jumps in with, like, there's nothing wrong with you. And there's no hesitation in his voice, and I think Isaac really needed to hear that, though unfortunately what James says next is something that is often said to aroace people, or aromantic people in general.
You probably just haven't found the right person yet. Yeah.
And Isaac kind of smiles a little bit and is like, yeah. He hasn't put all the pieces together yet, obviously, but I think he knows that it's more than just not having met the right person at this point, because, like, I think this whole situation has kind of made him reevaluate his entire life up to now, and the fact that, like, you know, he's never had any celebrity crushes, he's never had any crushes, period, and he's read so many books about romance. His closest friends are all, like, exuding romance out of their pores, but he has never felt that way, and he thought that when it was right, everything would just click, everything would come together. But here we have James, who it does seem like a very right sort of situation, but it hasn't come together, and he knows that he doesn't feel that way about James, who is someone who he feels like he should feel that way about. So, yeah, it's a very confusing time for poor Isaac, and I do feel very bad for James, but I really hope that they can keep being friends. James is such a sweet bean, and I want to see more of him. Okay, so now, Very symbolically, the weather has changed to rain. So here comes Isaac. And I love that they're using the same umbrellas that they did in the rugby scene in season 1. Like, good continuity there.
Did something happen?
Elle catches a look at his face and says, did something happen? And, like, I don't know how the others are so bad at reading his facial expression. Like, he does not look happy. If my friend came up to the group wearing that expression, I would not assume that something good had happened to him. So, you know, they really misread the situation.
Something definitely happened.
Can you guys just shut up?
I've heard people go either way on this scene of whether they think it was warranted for Isaac to blow up or not. And, like, I gotta say, I think it is entirely warranted here. Like, obviously, his friends mean well, and they don't deserve to be yelled at, but nonetheless, like, they are saying and doing the absolute worst possible things that they could in this moment. And it's not their fault, but it's ignorance in this case. Like, they just don't know any better. I'm really hoping that we'll get scenes of Isaac talking about asexuality and such with his friends next season. But it's especially interesting that, like, so in the last episode, Charlie seemed to show some knowledge of the idea of asexuality when he was talking to Nick. What he said to Nick was basically like, if you don't ever want to have sex, I'm okay with that, which shows like some grasp on the concept of asexuality, but it could have just been like Charlie being Charlie. So it might not necessarily mean that he has a greater education on this subject, but regardless, like, I can understand how the friend group misread the signs here, because again, Isaac and James really seemed to be gelling. They really seemed to like each other. So I think it's natural for them to assume that, like, just with all of them, here's another one going into a relationship, and isn't it nice? And they just want Isaac to be happy. But unfortunately, not knowing what Isaac is going through, they've said exactly the wrong thing here. All this time, no one has noticed what he's been going through. And granted, he has been hiding it really well. I think it's easy for the friend group not to dismiss him, but to just kind of take for granted that Isaac is okay. Because he's always just kind of there, like, reading his books and seeming to be fine. And so I think it's a real surprise for them that he blows up at them in this moment.
Look, I get that you don't think my life is interesting unless I have some kind of romantic drama going on, but I'm sorry to break it to you, I don't like him back.
You can tell Isaac has finally just reached a breaking point where, like, when every single person around you is so focused on romance and you are just realizing that you are different and you don't know why, I think that it's very understandable to have this reaction. And they all look very surprised.
Isaac, I'm fine. I don't want to talk about it.
The only complaint I have here is that from that scene, we jump straight into the Here and Queer exhibit, and suddenly Isaac is, like, happy again. I can't fathom a situation where the friend group would not follow up with Isaac and ask if he's okay and ask, like, what's going on or things like that. Like, especially Charlie. I feel like Charlie in particular would want to talk to Isaac about this and, like, make sure that he's okay. I wanted there to be a scene in here where someone checks in with him, or where we see one more scene of him before we jump into the Here and Queer. But because of how short the episodes are and how many different storylines are going on and how much important stuff happens in this episode, I understand why there wasn't room for that scene, but it still felt very abrupt, going from, like, very sad Isaac to, like, happy, we're at Elle's art exhibit Isaac. So okay, so we do have Nick giving Isaac a big old Nick Nelson hug, at least. So if that doesn't heal him, I don't know what will. And Elle looks fabulous. When does she not? But especially fabulous now. Isaac gives her his arm to escort her. There's the mysterious beardy man from the trailer that we were trying to figure out who he was and what he was doing there. Yeah, so it's interesting because, like, I got the impression that multiple artists were being featured, and obviously they are, but it's weird because, like, only Elle's painting is covered, and only Elle's painting is given kind of the grand, like, someone announcing it and Elle speaking in front of the whole crowd and everyone applauding. It's interesting. It seems like only Elle is given that privilege.
Elle, I love your piece.
She's from the north.
And I can't wait to see what art you make when you start this in September.
Yeah, obviously that was going to come out.
You got in? Yeah.
Oh my god!
Tao looks a little stunned, and Elle doesn't even really dare to look at him at first. And you can tell there's a lot going on, but when Elle looks over at him, Tao looks away. Like, he doesn't want her to see that he's upset about this, which is good. Like, again, it shows growth that even though he's struggling with his usual feelings of, like, worried about abandonment and losing people, he's trying not to let that show to Elle. But, you know, Elle obviously knows that he's not doing well with it. So here we have Isaac coming upon the work of this Aroace person, which is very cool.
It's my one. I love it. What's it about? Basically about my experience being aromantic and asexual.
The major criticism that I've heard people say about this is that they think it's too convenient that Isaac just happens to run across someone who's Aroace right when he needs to get this information. But, like, I think it's important to remember that this is not, and I mentioned this a little bit in a previous video, but, like, this is not something that has just suddenly become a thing for Isaac. This is something he's been thinking about and struggling with the whole season, if not the whole show. But, you know, we've been focusing on it for this season specifically. Also, he's at a place that is specifically celebrating queer artists. So it makes sense that there would be someone of the asexual, aromantic variety there. And the fact that Isaac is drawn to that piece makes sense because, you know, he has a fellow feeling. So, like, I don't think it's unrealistic at all. I don't think it's too convenient that Isaac would happen to run into this person because, again, it's not sudden. A lot of time has passed. Isaac's been dealing with this issue for quite some time. And, again, I do think that kind of the jump from seeing him with James to immediately going into this scene does make it seem very like these things are happening boom, 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 boom. But, you know, we can assume that there's a little bit of a time gap there. But even if there isn't, I think it makes perfect sense for this to happen. Like, this is the place where you would run into someone who could tell you about being Aroace.
Something about you is different, but you don't have the words to describe what that is. But then, freedom. The euphoria of freeing yourself from those pressures and expectations.
I teared up at this part when I first watched it, when the leaf spins around Isaac and, like, he has his moment of joy and discovery. And good song choice as well.
She's so moody. I already told her to leave early.
Yeah, and again, like, the way that Darcy looks now, like, she has her hair up in a cute way, she's wearing a bright top, and, like, dressing very loudly and very quirkily, like normal, but when we saw her at her home, her hair was down, she was wearing dull colors, and things like that, so...
So you guys can't tease me about being the token ally anymore, now that Sahar's here. I'm bisexual, so...
For Imogen. I think it's interesting that there's a little bit of friction between Sahar and Imogen, which, you know, based on what we learned of their previous friendship last episode, where, like, they were quite close, but then they kind of got distance from each other when Imogen got a boyfriend the previous year. I think it makes sense that Sahar is a little bit prickly towards Imogen. It's also very interesting that Imogen had no idea that Sahar was bi, but, you know, it's not surprising either.
You still coming to prom tomorrow?
Of course. Slow dance. Some cheesy song.
The very second they started talking about what a good time they were gonna have at prom, like, I knew. I knew how it was gonna go. Similar to Charlie saying in episode 1, everything's gonna be perfect.
Queer and trans artists we have here at the Lambert School!
This really seems like a great school. And I also wonder if, like, having seen the... Oh, God. I was gonna say, I wonder if, like, also having seen the place and realizing what a great environment this could be for Elle, I think is probably another part of why Tao is so understanding later. I think he was already moving in the right direction in terms of suppressing his usual abandonment issues in order to be there for Elle and be supportive. But also seeing the place and realizing, like, what a great place it is, I think that probably also helps Tao be like, yeah, you know, Elle should definitely go here. This is the right place for her to be.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Elle Argent.
I really hope they warned her ahead of time that they were going to ask her to speak, because, like, that's that's something.
Would you like to say a few words about your piece?
Never mind. She looks very stunned. So perhaps they did not ask her ahead of time.
With this piece, I guess I wanted to capture a place that holds a lot of happy memories. Somewhere I always felt safe.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful piece of art. But more so, like, I think it's really beautiful that Elle chose to paint her and the core friend group, Charlie and Isaac and Tao. And it's really interesting that in the painting, Elle has Tao behind her kind of staring at her, which is very interesting. And I love how, like, instead of the tree being like a painted part of the wall, it seems to be like a real tree sprouting. And the core friend group gets a hug.
I know you're probably annoyed that I didn't tell you I got in.
I'm not annoyed. Please don't base your decisions on how I feel.
Tao shows so much growth and so much maturity in this moment, where, like, he does not show Elle even a hint of his abandonment issues here. Reassures her he's not annoyed and she needs to make decisions based on what she wants and nothing to do with what he wants. So I'm very proud of Tao for taking the steps. Like, if you compare this Tao to, like, the Tao who texted Charlie, "We're barely friends anymore," a lot of growth has occurred. And I do like that from the Arrow Ace art piece, we just see, like, the little hearts fluttering in front of Tao and Elle while they're talking.
I may still stay at Higgs.
Tao knows, like, even in this moment, I think he knows. Like, having seen the place, having seen how happy Elle is here, knowing that she's going to absolutely thrive as an artist and a person at Lambert, he knows that she's going to go there.
Every single piece there was amazing.
Agreed.
Oh, here we fucking go.
I was just, like, in a different league.
And here is Ben, keeping up the grand tradition of entering the shot like a serial killer, just, like, comes out of lurk.
What are you doing here?
And Nick immediately steps in front of Charlie, very much mirroring the scene from all the way back season 1, episode 1, where he, like, is standing between Ben and Charlie.
I just want to apologize.
And Ben looks rough. It's clear that he's going through shit and maybe is actually, like, questioning his life choices and hopefully will become a better person in the future.
I just want to apologize.
That does stop Charlie in his tracks. Nick still looks really concerned and angry and, like...
I'm not going back to Truro for sixth form. If you really hate me after this, you'll never see me again.
And I think that's what finally does it. Like, Ben saying that he's leaving Truro entirely, that makes Charlie finally be like, fine. And he lets go of Nick's hand to walk over alone. Which is interesting because, like, I think it's really symbolic of the fact that, like, Charlie has to face his demons on his own. Like, Nick can be there, like, always standing behind him, always ready to support him and, you know, be there for him. But in the end, Charlie has to face these demons on his own. So he lets go of Nick's hand and walks over to Ben by himself.
I'm a messed up person, Charlie.
So here's the thing about this speech from Ben. He starts off with, "I'm a messed up person," and I think it's good that he has finally realized this. And I do think that Ben is sincere in what he says here. But I also think, again, in terms of, we talked about this before, where Ben has created a revisionist history of everything that happened between him and Charlie. And in his mind, it's a love story. In Charlie's mind, it's a horror story. One of the things that I think is so interesting about this scene is that the speech that Ben gives, it's not word for word, but I have definitely seen a male character in a male-female romance in the climax of the movie or the show or whatever say something like this, and it ends happily ever after for them. This is the kind of speech that you would see in a romantic film, particularly one from the 90s, and this would be what the love interest, after being just an absolutely shitty person for the whole movie, would say to the main character at the end, and like she would fall into his arms, and we would realize that like, yeah, he did some bad stuff, but her love has changed him, and now he's ready to be there for her, and blah 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 blah. So I love the fact that Ben gives this emotional apology that in another movie, in another TV series, would end in him and Charlie getting together. I love that he gives this apology, and Charlie's like, no. And here's why. I love that Charlie explains. I love that he is angry. I love that he is finally able to kind of get some closure from this issue, because I'm sure it felt good to Charlie to tell Ben last season after Sports Day, like, you don't get to have an opinion about me. And, you know, I'm sure it felt good to beat his ass at the race and then tell him off a bit. But this is what Ben needed to hear. And I think perhaps Ben is finally in a place where maybe he can actually take this information in and, you know, do something good with it and maybe help, you know, maybe it will help him on his journey, but he's definitely not there yet, and Charlie is under no obligation to forgive him. But anyway, let's listen to what he has to say.
I liked you. You know that, don't you? I know I was a piece of shit, but I really liked you.
It's clear through the whole speech that Ben is expecting Charlie to accept his apology, and Ben is expecting Charlie to, like, think, oh, he really did like me. Okay, that's great. Yay. But obviously that's not the case.
I want to be like you two, but my parents would never accept who I really am. I'm sorry for everything.
And again, I do think Ben means it here. I do think he means his apology, but I also think that, like, the reason for his apology here is that, number one, he's hoping that Charlie will get back with him, which is not going to happen. And number two, he's hoping that Charlie will absolve him and be like, that's okay, you were going through a rough time, it's cool. And, you know, forgiveness is important. But after all the damage that Ben did to Charlie, and, like, damage that will probably be with Charlie for his entire life, potentially, like, Charlie is under no obligation to forgive him. I'm glad that the show didn't go the direction of redeeming Ben completely and having Charlie, like, accept his apology and them being friends now. I love a redemption arc, but not when the person has been this toxic and caused this much damage and, like, seemed to take a twisted pleasure out of causing the damage that he did cause. Like Charlie says, I'm glad that Ben realizes that what he did was wrong. I'm glad that he wants to change. I hope he does change. But, you know, far away from Charlie. He needs to not be near Charlie ever again. I've talked before about my own experiences where when I was in high school, I was in an emotionally abusive relationship. And I have had post-traumatic stress disorder that stemmed from that experience of, like, legit flashbacks and, like, having very severe mental and emotional difficulties as a result of that relationship. And it's to the point where, like, if I even hear the name, and this was like over 20 years ago, and I still have a knee-jerk reaction of, like, shudder and just feeling gross and awful when I think about certain things from that time, or, like, when I hear the name of the person who I was with back then, or, like, God forbid if I see his picture on Facebook or something. And, like, I've tried to imagine what it would be like if he tried to apologize. And apparently, so I heard through one of my friends that, who still lives in my hometown area, that the person I was with did realize that he treated me badly. Like, apparently he told my friend a long time after, you know, many years after we had graduated, that he really treated me badly, and he realized that. But I'm kind of with Charlie. Like, I hope that he changed for the better, and I hope that he didn't hurt anyone else like he hurt me, but I never want to see him. I never want to talk to him, and I don't want to see his face. I don't want to hear his name. I don't want to have anything to do with him. It's just too painful to think about, and the fact that, like, it was lifelong damage that was dealt to me as a result of this person. So I'm totally there with Charlie here, and you know, I never got to have this moment with my abusive boyfriend, but I can live vicariously through Charlie at least.
I just wanted something good. You were something good.
Joe's acting here is fantastic because, like, you can see Charlie looks very upset here, but he also looks angry because I think he can tell from the way that Ben is speaking that Ben is seeing their relationship, if it can even be called that, through a very selective lens. And Charlie, like, I feel like his anger and upset just growing and growing and growing until he finally, you know, tells Ben off.
Do you remember the first time you kissed me?
When Charlie asked, do you remember the first time you kissed me, it's clear that to Ben, this is a good memory.
You didn't even ask. You didn't pause to wonder whether it was what I wanted.
The way that his smile just slowly drops as he realizes that it was not a good experience for Charlie. And, like, I think Ben really knew that he was not treating Charlie well, obviously, or he wouldn't be apologizing. But even at the time, I'm sure he knew that he was not treating Charlie well. But I don't think he realized the depth of the damage that he did until this moment. And I'm glad that Charlie tells him. And I love that Nick is just silently standing behind Charlie this whole time. Always in frame, always ready to step forward if something happens, but, you know, just a quiet, solid support, but letting Charlie say his piece, letting Charlie deal with this moment on his own.
I didn't realize that you had all the control. When I eventually did realize, I thought, this must be what I deserve. Someone taking whatever he wants from me whenever he wants.
And, like, you can see Ben start to open his mouth like he's going to protest or say something, but Charlie just keeps talking, and I'm glad.
Whenever anything good happens in my life, there's a little voice in the back of my mind telling me I'm worthless. And now you want me to forgive you so you can feel better about yourself. I'm glad you realized what you did was wrong, but you don't get to ambush me into forgiving you. Sorry doesn't make up for everything you did to me.
Yeah, sorry doesn't make up for everything you did to me.
I really hope you become a better person so you don't hurt anyone else. But I don't want to be there to see that happen. I don't want to see you ever again.
The very second that Nick can tell that Charlie is done, he steps forward, he takes Charlie's hand, and off they go. And Ben is left, like, looking very upset and kind of, you know, I hope that he's reevaluating things. I hope that he really thinks about what Charlie said to him. Because, like, Charlie's vision of things and how they were between them, I don't think is something that Ben had considered before, obviously. Like, he knew he was hurting Charlie, he did not realize it was this much. And I hope that Ben takes that to heart, and even though he's not ready yet to come out or to accept this side of himself, I hope that he can learn how to deal with his internalized homophobia without hurting other people. But yeah, this is a great moment of, like, Ben is standing here and he's in front of the here and queer, just giant letters, here and queer. And he's just admitted that he wants to be like Nick and Charlie, and, like, the water rushes out to him of the rainbow, and, like, there's a moment when he kind of hesitates, like he's thinking about stepping into it, but then he turns around and walks away, and we hear the seagulls. The water retreats, because he's just not there yet, he's not ready yet, but, you know, I hope that he eventually gets there, because, you know, that's a good thing for anyone, but I also hope that we don't see him again. I love Sebastian Croft, but I don't want to see him again in this show. And Charlie doesn't either, and I think that it would really lessen the impact of what Charlie says here if suddenly Ben is back, you know, in a future season. So I do really hope that they don't, like, if they brought him back for, like, a brief moment in the final season, like, where we see him not with Charlie, but, like, see him being, like, not a dick, or, like, having come out to his parents, or something like that, that would be fine. But he needs to stay the hell away from Charlie Spring, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So we're about halfway through the episode, and I'm wondering if I should stop here, because I'm very tired, and, like, I want to give my all to these reactions, and I feel like if I keep going, I will get less and less coherent as we go along. So why don't we stop with that first sorry from Ben, and then next time we'll pick up with the amazing dinner scene, which, yeah, I have a lot to say about that as well. And yeah, so we'll start up next time right at the dinner scene with the Spring and Nelson families and the amazingness that happens there. So that's it for the first half of episode 7. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, I love to read your essays and dissertations and thoughts, whether they are in a solid chunk or broken up into many little comments. Whatever you feel comfortable doing, it's great to read them, and I love it when you folks I love it when you reply to each other's comments and there's all these discussions going on, and it's great. So please feel free to do that, and yeah. Oh, and another good thing about splitting this video in two is that means instead of having only one video left before we're done with Heartstopper Season 2, it means we could potentially have 3 left, where we have Part 2 of Episode 7, Part 1 of Episode 8, and Part 2 of Episode 8, because, I feel like I could do an entire hour just on the final scene of Episode 8, so we'll see. Yeah, so that might be a good plan, that might be a good thing to do, so. Okay, well, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to everyone who watches, likes, subscribes, all that cool stuff. Feel free to follow me on social media if you like. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, and I'm on Twitch. I stream games sometimes. And a huge thank you to our patrons, who, as always, are just so amazing and awesome and wonderful, and such a great community. Feel free to join them if you like. You can do so for as little as $1 a month, and you get access to all kinds of cool stuff. So, and a shout out to our Nick Nelson members, Kelly Walker, Paul Z, and Kent Smither. Alright, well that's it for today's video. I will see you folks later. Have a great rest of your day or night or whatever time of day it may happen to be, and I will see you next time. Alright, bye. It didn't stop. It didn't stop. Let's try again. Okay, I'm pressing it now.